first sign that something was wrong came halfway up the ridge. We'd been climbing since dawn, the sun already high and sharp through the spruce, and everyone was sweating under the weight of their packs. I remember thinking the air felt thinner than it should have been for that elevation. Then Beth, quiet, steady Beth, stopped mid-step, pressed a hand to her forehead and said, "I think I just need a second." Her voice was tight, almost brittle. We all figured it was just fatigue. The air was dry, the climb relentless, and the morning coffee hadn't quite done its job. No one thought twice when she sat down on a boulder and sipped her water, but as we gained altitude, something about her seemed off. She lagged behind, tripping over roots, her laugh forced when someone cracked a joke. At one point, she snapped at me for suggesting she eat a snack, completely out of character. We assumed it was just the altitude or dehydration. I'd had similar spells on long hikes, a dull headache, lightheadedness, that faint ringing in the ears. Nothing a break and a granola bar couldn't fix. By late afternoon, the wind picked up. Clouds rolled over the ridge, grey and heavy. We decided to camp early near a shallow alpine lake, wind-bitten but beautiful. The air smelled of cold water and pine resin. We pitched the tents in a little hollow to shield us from the gusts. I fired up my old camp stove, one of those single fuel models that hiss when you prime them, while the others gathered wood. Beth sat wrapped in her jacket, pale and quiet. "Probably just altitude sickness," I said to Mark as I stirred the pot. He nodded, glancing toward her. "She'll be fine after some food and rest." But that night, as we sat around the little blue flame of the stove, I noticed she wasn't eating. She kept rubbing her temples, eyes unfocused, muttering that everything sounded distant. The stars came out sharp and cold. The wind dropped. I remember the silence more than anything, too still, like the mountains were holding their breath. I crawled into my sleeping bag, thinking she'd be fine by morning. We all did. When dawn came, Beth didn't get up. She wasn't unconscious, not yet, but her face had gone ashen, and she couldn't seem to focus her eyes. The headache had become unbearable, and her breathing sounded shallow, almost wheezy. That's when the first thread of fear began to pull at the edges of our calm. We weren't just dealing with altitude sickness anymore. Something else was creeping through our camp, something we couldn't yet name. We gathered around her tent in the thin morning light, our breath fogging in the chill air. The lake was perfectly still, a mirror for the grey sky above, but none of us noticed its beauty anymore. Beth sat upright, wrapped in her sleeping bag, staring blankly ahead as if trying to make sense of something only she could see. Her skin looked pale, almost waxy. "Hey Beth," I said softly, crouching down beside her. "You know where we are?" She blinked slowly, frowned. "Of course," she murmured, but her voice wavered. Then she looked at me, no, through me, and added, "We need to go home. There's something wrong with the fire." "The fire?" Mark asked, puzzled. "It's out." But she wasn't making sense anymore. She rubbed at her temples, muttering about the smell of metal and smoke, though there was none. We exchanged glances, the kind of uneasy look shared between people who don't want to say what they're thinking. Altitude sickness can make people confused, but this seemed deeper. I tried to remember the symptoms: headache, dizziness, nausea, maybe confusion at high elevation, but we were barely above 8,000 feet. It didn't add up. "Maybe she's dehydrated," said Anna, digging through her pack for electrolyte tablets. "She barely drank yesterday." We coaxed her to take small sips, but each swallow made her grimace. She complained her head hurt worse whenever she moved. By midday, her breathing grew faster, almost panicked. I kept replaying the night before in my mind, the long use of the stove, the way the tent flap had been zipped tight against the cold, the faint chemical tang that had lingered in the air before I fell asleep. That thought sent a chill through me. I crawled into her tent, nose close to the fabric. It smelled faintly sweet, metallic, almost like exhaust. My stomach turned. "Mark," I said quietly, "do you smell that?" He leaned in, sniffed, then looked at me with wide eyes. "Oh, hell." The stove. We'd used it inside the vestibule to warm the tent before bed. Not for long, just a few minutes while we talked. But long enough, maybe. We all knew better. Every training course, every manual warned of it. Never use a stove in an enclosed space. But the wind had been cutting cold, and it seemed harmless at the time. Carbon monoxide, odorless, invisible, deadly. "Get her out," I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "Now!" We dragged her sleeping bag into the open air, the wind biting our faces. Beth moaned softly, barely conscious. Anna wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, whispering encouragements, while Mark and I tore open every tent flap and turned off the stove's valve. The air felt thick and still, the sky pressing down heavy and grey. For the first time, I felt real fear settle into my bones. We were miles from help, and whatever we'd done or failed to do was already in motion. Beth's breathing was shallow, her lips a faint bluish hue. The wind had picked up again, cutting across the lake and snapping at the tent corners, carrying with it the sharp scent of cold pine. We laid her near the fire pit, though none of us dared light a flame now, and covered her with our spare coats. I remember her whispering something over and over, a quiet, broken phrase. "The light's too bright, too bright." We'd all gone silent. No one wanted to admit the thought that hovered between us, that we'd nearly poisoned ourselves, that a few more minutes inside that tent might have ended worse. Mark pulled out his map and compass, his hands trembling slightly. "We're 12 miles from the trailhead," he said. "There's a ranger station about halfway, near the old fire road." Anna looked up, pale and drawn. "Can she walk that far?" I shook my head. "Not like this. If it is carbon monoxide poisoning, she needs oxygen. All we can do now is keep her warm and get her moving as soon as she can stand." For the next hour, we took turns keeping her awake, talking to her, rubbing her hands, encouraging her to sip water. The sun broke through for a moment, glinting off the lake like a blade, and I thought I saw a hint of colour return to her face. That tiny change felt like hope. By late morning, we packed camp in grim silence. The trail wound downward into a narrow valley, thick with spruce and lichen, the kind of place where sound felt muffled. Beth leaned on me for balance as we started down. Every few minutes, she'd stop, dizzy, blinking like she was fighting to stay conscious. I tried not to show it, but fear gnawed at me. I'd been on dozens of trips, led groups through storms and floods, even carried an injured hiker 10 miles once. But this was different. You can't fight gas or cold air with grit and muscle. You can't see the enemy. Halfway down the ridge, Beth stumbled hard, her legs buckling. I barely caught her before she hit the rocks. Her breathing had gone ragged again, and her skin clammy. Anna knelt beside us, tears brimming in her eyes. "We can't wait," she said. "We've got to get her to help now." Mark dropped his pack, eyes darting between the map and the fading light. "If we cut across that drainage, we'll hit the fire road faster," he said, tracing the line with a shaking finger. "It's rough, but shorter." I looked at Beth, then at the dark slash of forest below. Shorter, yes, but steeper, wetter, and easy to lose your way. Still, we didn't have a choice. I tightened her pack straps, hoisted her arm over my shoulder, and we started down the slope into the trees. The forest swallowed the light almost immediately. The air felt heavy and damp, and every breath tasted faintly of iron and moss. Behind us, the wind sighed through the pines like a warning we didn't quite understand. The descent was brutal. The slope dropped sharply into the valley, slick with rain-darkened needles and loose shale. Each step slid a few inches, and more than once, I thought we'd all go tumbling into the ravine below. Beth leaned heavily on me, her head lolling, breath shallow. Every so often she murmured a word or two, mostly nonsense, but once she said clearly, "I can't see the ground." It sent a cold ripple down my spine. Mark led the way, hacking through low branches with his trekking pole, his face streaked with sweat and worry. Anna followed close, watching every move Beth made like she could will her to stay upright. The forest pressed in tight around us, dense and damp. the light dim even though it was barely noon. We crossed a small stream, the water icy on our ankles, and stopped on the far bank to catch our breath. My heart was pounding hard enough to shake my chest. Beth slumped to her knees, clutching her stomach. Then she'd vomited, just water and bile, and collapsed forward. I caught her again, lowering her gently to the ground. Her skin was cold to the touch, her pulse fluttering like a trapped bird. Anna knelt beside me, whispering, "Oh God, she's getting worse." "We've got to keep her moving," I said, though my voice didn't sound like my own. "If we stop, she might not start again." Mark cursed softly under his breath and stared at the map. "We're close. Maybe a mile, maybe 2. We pushed on. The forest began to thin, and patches of open sky appeared through the trees, pale grey, with low clouds tumbling over the ridge like waves. I could hear a faint rush in the distance, not wind this time, but water, the sound of a creek, or maybe the drainage spilling toward the fire road. Beth's legs gave out completely not long after that. We laid her on a patch of moss beside a fallen log. Her eyes were half open, lips cracked. I took her wrist. Her pulse was there, weak but steady. Anna covered her with the emergency blanket, whispering over and over, "Stay with us, Beth, please." Mark and I locked eyes, and I knew what he was thinking before he spoke. "I'll go," he said. "I'll run ahead to the ranger station. If I follow the drainage, I can get there faster without the packs. You two stay with her." I didn't want to split up. The forest already felt like it was closing in on us. But the alternative, waiting helplessly while Beth's breathing slowed, was worse. He dropped his gear, took only his canteen and a whistle, and started down the valley, his figure shrinking between the trees until the forest swallowed him whole. Then it was just the 3 of us, the still air, the faint rush of distant water, and the slow, fragile sound of Beth breathing. I sat beside her, holding her hand, feeling the cold seep through her skin. Anna was quiet, eyes fixed on the dark path where Mark had gone. Neither of us said it aloud, but we both knew, if help didn't come soon, the mountain might keep her. The forest felt timeless after Mark disappeared, like the world had narrowed to the soft rasp of Beth's breathing and the muted hush of wind in the trees. Every few minutes, I'd lean close, listening to the fragile rhythm of her pulse. Anna sat cross-legged beside her, rubbing Beth's arms through the blanket, whispering stories from old trips we'd taken together, trying, I think, to anchor her somewhere familiar. The sky darkened by degrees, clouds bled together, and a thin mist began to drift through the trees, settling on our clothes in cold beads. It wasn't rain exactly, just the mountain exhaling. I kept glancing down the slope, half expecting to see Mark's red jacket reappear between the pines, but there was nothing. Then Beth stirred. Her eyelids fluttered, and she whispered something I couldn't make out. I leaned closer. "What is it?" "Cold," she murmured. "So cold." Her teeth began to chatter, and I realised with a jolt that her body temperature was dropping fast. The carbon monoxide had left her weak, unable to regulate heat. The damp air was finishing what the gas had started. Hypothermia. Anna and I moved on instinct. We pulled our sleeping bags around her, layered coats, even my spare flannel, tucking everything tight to trap warmth. I built a fire, not near the tents this time, but out in the open where the smoke could drift free. I remember my hands shaking as I struck the match, praying the wood wasn't too wet to catch. When the flames finally flared up, orange against the grey, I nearly cried from relief. We huddled close, feeding the fire constantly. Time lost its meaning. The light faded from grey to indigo, and I began to wonder if Mark had made it, if maybe he'd gotten turned around. But then, faintly at first, we heard a whistle. Anna's head snapped up. "That's him!" Through the trees came 2 figures, Mark, panting, mud up to his knees, and a ranger behind him carrying a small oxygen tank in one hand. They moved fast, faces set and efficient. The ranger knelt beside Beth, checking her pulse. Her pupils then fitted the mask gently over her mouth. The hiss of the oxygen filled the silence. Minutes passed, and then Beth's eyes opened fully, confused, glassy, but awake. She looked at me and croaked, "You smell like smoke." It was the best thing I'd ever heard. They got her walking within the hour, supported between the two of us as we followed the ranger back toward the road. When we finally saw the weathered sign for the fire station, the first light of dawn was breaking behind the ridge, painting the wet leaves gold. Later, the ranger told us we'd done everything right once we realised what was happening, that another hour in that tent and she might not have woken up. I didn't say it aloud, but I knew luck had played the bigger hand. That night, sitting beside the cabin stove, Beth asleep under blankets and the rest of us staring into the flickering flame, I couldn't shake one thought. The mountains don't always roar their warnings. Sometimes they whisper them, and it's up to you to listen.